I've actually tried to find.
All right,
Okay.
stand by.
To the Arts and Antique Radio Show, where your host, nationally recognized certified appraiser Elizabeth Stewart, Santa Barbara's treasure sleuth, will help you put a value on the treasures in your own home.
Every time it rains, pennies from heaven. Don't you know each cloud contains pennies from heaven?
So let's find out. How
Three,
valuable is it?
2, 1, you're live.
Hello, 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 Santa Barbara. It's your shed trust of everything valuable and beautiful, Elizabeth Stewart. I love the Santa Barbara Museum of Natural History. I love everything about it. And whenever I have guests come to Santa Barbara and family members that have been to the museum with me a million times, I love it. I mean, I love everything, the old building, the displays, the way it's set up, and the innovative things they do there, and the various ages that can be entertained there, Richard, and strange things that happen there. For example, in the back, there's a day where the raptors come, and that you can hold on your arm a beautiful raptor bird, or sometimes one of my favorite lectures there, Richard, was they had a ethnobotanist talk about the Chumash healing garden. It's centuries beyond, European domination, and it was fascinating. We were right there in the garden in the back while she was taking us through the various plants that were used, like for baldness and toothache and all kinds of things. And I have with us Luke Swetland, and he joined the Santa Barbara Museum of Natural History as president and chief executive officer in 2013. And over the time, and Richard, we had Luke come on the air way back then and introduce him and his family, et cetera, to Santa Barbara. It was really interesting because since then, I mean, Luke has put his imprint in so many ways on the museum. And I want to talk about that a little bit, but I also want to talk about two shows that are on right now at the museum that really intrigued me. One is, it's called Lady, and it's about female contributions to the portraiture of botany, plants, etc. And I had no idea that females played such a large role in the 18th and 19th century as artists of botany. And the other show that I really want Luke to talk about is the Curtis show. Now, Curtis was a very famous photographer of the West and the Native Americans of the West in the third quarter of the 19th century to the end of the 19th, beginning of the 20th century. And if anybody can be blamed, let's say, for putting the stamp on what this country thinks of as Native American, it might be Curtis. And the show talks about that. It's a controversial subject because there's no questioning he was a great artist. But whether or not he was a propagandist is another question, and that's kind of what intrigued me about the show that's at the Santa Barbara Museum of Natural History. And so I want to introduce Luke, and I want to say, Luke, the ethnobotany lecture, I think you had the professor a couple of times to the museum, and I've been every time she's come. And one time I brought my best friend, Eli, and Eli is Native American. He's Ute. And I brought Eli to hear the lecture she gave about the Chumash ethnobotany. It was really interesting because his attitude was so different from mine. Mine was, oh my gosh, these people were so amazingly advanced. And he was like, we've always been this way. Mm-hmm. This is how we've learned. I mean, it goes back a few more years than in your history, by the way, he said to me. So it was very, very, I mean, I just love the kind of things the museum brings us. But I wonder if you could tell us a little bit about the show, the Curtis show. Maybe, Luke, start us off with that.
Sure. Well, first off, Elizabeth and Richard, great to be back with you guys. Thanks for having me. And you're absolutely right about the museum. It's like an old friend you come back to visit with again and again because there's certain things it's like tomato soup and grilled cheese sandwiches, that you'd have at your mom's house. But there's always something new. And you're right, we have a couple of terrific shows up right now. And the first that we'll talk about is our Edward Curtis photography show. And you're right. So Curtis was a well-known professional photographer on the East Coast in the late 1880s, 1890s. And then in 1900, he's invited out to northern Montana to witness the Sundance. And it really has an impact on him because he's a pretty keen cultural observer. And he knows that official US government policy is really to do everything we could to kind of eradicate Native American cultures. That's why you have Indian boarding schools and reservations. And really, the government wants to assimilate Native Americans into white culture and do everything they can to destroy culture. And so Curtis had this fear that all this was going to be erased, kind of this myth of the vanishing Native American. So he sets out for the next 30 years to document as many tribal communities as he can. So over 30 years, he travels across the West, brings his camera, sets up his tent, develops all the glass plate negatives right there in the field, and documents 80 different tribes. And, over the course of that 30 years, he created thousands of photographs. And, the museum has a full set, all 20 volumes of the books, the text, and the accompanying large format photographs. And so a selection of those is what is on display in our courtyard gallery now through April 30th.
May I ask Luke, so first of all, dear listener, what Luke is talking about is Curtis through his career. I've appraised exactly what Luke is talking about, these books. But also there's different photographic processes that Curtis used. There's there's the silver gelatin photo, which is the kind of photo that you would expect in the late 19th, early 20th century. But then he also, instead of the amalgam being silver, he also used gold and platinum as well. And there's various values for those levels. I mean, the gold and platinum being extremely high priced. And I'm wondering, Luke, how did the museum acquire the Curtis archive? Was it a donation?
Actually, those 20 volumes came in a series of donations. The first 11 volumes were donated to the museum in 1935. Then in 1938, we acquired volume 12 by donation. And the last volumes were donated a little bit after that. So like much of the museum's amazing collection, it's been donated from people in this community who themselves were collectors, and they wanted to see their collections be preserved and be accessible to others in the community. And so that's one of the greatest treasures about the museum is it is Santa Barbara's museum, built by Santa Barbara for Santa Barbara.
And Luke, what was also fascinating was not too long ago, at sort of the height of the pandemic, the museum kind of punted back and said, okay, let's do some really interesting Zoom lectures. And I had the honor of you and your staff asked me to do a lecture on that topic exactly, which was why donate and the advantages to donate. And it's interesting because right as we speak, I'm looking at a collection of very, very contemporary artists and the monographs, books that someone had collected over many years. And they're trying to decide, do I donate or do I sell? And the decision, of course, in my opinion, is donate for the really important reason that you gave, which is the collection stays together, and the collection also builds upon other collections.
Mhm.
And not only that, of course, there's tax advantages, great tax advantages to donating. But I love that idea that there's what I tried to say to the folks that attended the lecture that I gave at the Santa Barbara Museum of Natural History was that there's the difference between value and worth. So when you're selling something, that's okay. I'm coming in with this value at the end of the day, which is a dollar figure. But to a community, when you're talking about the Curtis materials being donated over a period of, let's say 30 years, coming in various sections from various collectors in Santa Barbara, that is a great example of worth, what it's worth to the community, because very few museums, by the way, have all those volumes.
That's right. Yeah, it's an
And
exceptional.
it is very rare. It's rare, and it's tremendous research material, and it's tremendous enlightening material as an example of what was going on. Both, like you said, advocating for a certain stance, because the visual image gives you a certain immediate understanding that the words do not. And so it's super important. Hey, Richard, I think we should go to quick break because I want to talk about the other show that's on at the museum regarding women's interpretation of botanicals, what we call in the art world botanicals, and they're extremely precise. Before there was microscopes and photography to document what a plant was composed of, there were botanists that actually were great artists as well. And, and we think the same when we think of natural history, for example, when Audubon was doing the images of birds before we even knew anything about what a camera could capture. His images were better. So I want to talk a little bit about the show regards to botany when we get back from the break. So Richard, let's go to quick break, and then when we come back, Luke Swetland's going to, who actually is the president and chief executive officer of the museum, is going to tell us a little bit about the other show that's fascinating up at the museum. Don't turn that down. Back in a minute.
You're clear.
Okay.
You said you can get there a few minutes early. Please check the address. Yep.
No, I didn't know that the museum had owned the Curtis archive. I did not know that. That's fantastic.
Yeah, I mean, we consider it probably the most valuable thing in our collection.
I'm trying to think. I've appraised individual volumes, but I have not had the opportunity to do the whole set. I don't know what that even goes for. Let's see. Let's look at the latest records.
Yeah, over that 30 years, Curtis took close to 40,000 photographs.
Yeah, prolific.
Coming back.
And then
In 3, 2, one, you're live.
Welcome back. It's Elizabeth Stewart. I'm speaking with Luke Swetland, President and Chief Executive Officer of the Santa Barbara Museum of Natural History. And he's talking to us about two really interesting shows that are happening at the museum. And we talked about the Edward Curtis show. And I was a little bit gobsmacked, Luke, because I had no idea that our museum was, our Natural History Museum owned the entire set of 20 volumes of Curtis's work. And during the break, I just did a quick little search. I mean, so here we have the volumes, and in each volume is X number of images. And it's not like printed material like a book, it's different. So I just did a quick search as to some of the prices that are being paid for the individual images. And the individual images, the average value I'm getting right now is between 5,000 and 6,000 per. So when you say that's a valuable collection, it's beyond, huge, fantastic. Anyway, so tell us about the other show that's up, ladies.
Yeah, so this is an awesome show that's in our Maximus Art Gallery, and it's actually called Drawn by a Lady. And what it does is it features the work of 8 women. Very little is known about these women, and so it's really a case of bringing forward hidden stories that have never been told before. In the 19th century, the 1800s, when women's ability to pursue education was very limited and their place was in the home, pursuing kind of the study and the drawing of plants was considered an acceptable feminine pursuit, which makes sense. Flowers, herb gardens. And so early botany, and it wasn't considered a science, becoming a great kind of artist of botanical things was considered a wonderful accomplishment, not a scientific pursuit. And during the Victorian era, that separation of the women's sphere and the man's sphere becomes even more pronounced, as you well know, Elizabeth. And so you have these women who are really pursuing real science. They are looking at microscopes, they are studying plant physiology, they're describing plants that they're growing, and they're publishing those their findings. And you come across a number of botanical books that don't even acknowledge who the author is. It's published anonymously, or it's published under their husband's name, or it's simply noted that this botanical book was drawn by a lady, hence the name of the exhibition. But so it really is an extraordinary look into kind of the secret lives of middle-class women, particularly in England and here in the United States, and bringing their work out and letting people see that. So that is a terrific show that's going to be up through July 2nd.
I just have to say, so what's interesting about that was, yes, there was this divergence of what was proper for a lady to do, because if you were upper class lady, you had, obviously a staff, and you had time to do some things around the house that maybe were more genteel. It was genteel to paint porcelain slips, white slips of porcelain, that the ladies would do just that, botanical drawings of flowers and fruit on these pieces of porcelain, and then fire have them fired. I find a lot of that, my great grandmother painted porcelain. Yeah, that was a genteel thing to do. Likewise, especially in England and the United States, it was genteel to be sort of an observant gardener. And one of the cool estates that I appraised, there's herbariums. So what that is, they're pieces of paper on which ladies would actually press specimens in such beautiful ways that they created these beautiful scrapbooks of flora and fauna of their local communities. But they're absolutely gorgeous. They're made with the designer's eye. And so there's the real specimen of plants that are in these books in some cases, and in some cases it's the gorgeous pen and ink and watercolor, or pen and ink enhanced with watercolor drawings of plants that are so fantastic and beautiful. And now you're telling it wasn't really done to have your name published as a woman, that it was by a lady.
Yeah, exactly. And by the end of the 19th century, the late Victorian period, now a lot of the natural history, the gentleman's pursuits were beginning to be converted into like real science. And so, now there's a distinction between polite botany, which continues to be an amusement suitable for ladies, and botanical science, which is an occupation for the serious thoughts of man. So it remains highly gendered, and we can still see certain gender kind of issues in the sciences today. So we've made great progress, but we ain't out of the woods yet.
I love it. Yeah, and it's interesting because when you talk about the early divergence between the observance of nature being genteel pursuit and then the observance of nature being science, you get like a really interesting cross-section of the kind of men that we're kind of coming out of both traditions. So you've got the Darwins of the world and the Smithsons of the world, that they are so incredibly observant, but at the same time they're not trained as scientists, and it's actually their hobby, their genteel hobby.
They are creating the science despite themselves.
Yeah. And I'm wondering how much of that kind of relies upon the petite shoulders of the genteel women in the mid to late 19th century that are actually, I mean, and dear listener, what you don't realize is that this was done. It was done a lot. Women would get together and paint botany, and they'd paint herbs and flowers. They'd paint them on porcelain. They'd paint them on paper. It was done a lot.
And some of these women were incredible artists. They were just unrecognized, and it just wasn't valued, their work, the same way if it was done by a man that it would be.
It's some of the artists, it's interesting, some of the artists that started this way and that were lucky enough to be born towards the end of the 19th century, they started as painting flowers and fruits, plants, and being botanical illustrators, etc. But because of, especially in England, because they were fanciful and interesting and safe, many of them were translated really well into children's book illustrators. And I'm thinking of oh gosh, Beatrice, what's her name? I can't remember. Potter, that's right. She started as a botanical artist. And so the natural world was safe and accessible, and then it could be safe and accessible to children, even though the natural world is pretty vicious. It was couched in a way that was safe for children. But a lot of these women, they began with botany and went on. So anyway, Luke, let's summarize. We've got the two shows. Tell people how they see them. How do they need reservations? Tell us the details on those.
The museum is open 6 days a week. We're not open on Tuesday, folks. So 10 to 5 every other day of the week. You do not need reservations. Just come on down. Make sure you give yourself plenty of time, because in addition to these two shows, we have all of our other galleries, our beautiful outdoors. The creek is flowing. The woods are green. There's just so much to enjoy here at the museum. Or, of course, be sure and visit the Sea Center down on Stearns Wharf. and take a look at the Santa Barbara Channel and some of the amazing animals that live in the channel who are visiting us at the Sea Center until we return them back home again.
And then, Luke, I'm remiss in that you've got such a beautiful resume. I've got it right in front of me, but just very quickly, some of the positions that Luke, I'm just so proud that we have him here in Santa Barbara. I was proud in 2013 when they hired you, but he was Vice President, Chief Operating Officer at the Autry Museum in Los Angeles. And he did all sorts of work at the Autry, which is a lovely little museum. Well, it's actually not such a little museum anymore.
No.
Head of Information Resources and Senior Manager of Bibliographic Services of the Getty Conservation Institute, and Editor-in-Chief of AATA Online, Art and Archaeological Technical Abstracts. So Luke's background is in American Studies, but also in library science. And I'm always blown away by, Luke described it right, the odd ducks of library science, because they have to be multi-thinkers. They have to be able to have boxes in their heads, but they have to know what those boxes contain. So they have to know both the organizational structure, but what they're organizing on top of it. So it's a really interesting combination of things. Professional work in Los Angeles at the Japanese American National Museum. He was deputy director and senior vice president. Little Tokyo destination, they built a new pavilion under Luke's tenure. And before that, he was in the Midwest in Dearborn, Michigan. He began his museum career at Henry Ford Museum in Greenfield Village. And that was something I kind of knew, but I forgot, because that was the museum that I studied. So I studied that museum because Mr. Ford had a vision of what America was, and that museum sort of embodied that vision. It was so interesting to me how a museum could actually become the vision and the almost propaganda for a certain way of being. And I thought that museum was a good example of that. I was fascinated when I was working on my master's in historic preservation. I was looking at that museum pretty closely, Luke. As we said, master's degree in American Studies, Master of Information and Library Science at the University of Michigan, Ann Arbor, and Vice President of the Board of California Association of Museums. Cool. And treasurer. Huh?
Elizabeth, I have had many great opportunities, but the finest opportunity of my career is the one right here in Santa Barbara, serving you at the Museum of Natural History and Sea Center. So I thank you for having me on. Thank you, Santa Barbara, for letting me stick around for 10 years. And I hope to be here many more years to come.
That's right. It's been 10 years. Oh my gosh, Richard. It's been 10 years. Amazing. Okay, thanks, Luke. Thank you for joining us. And dear listeners, don't turn that down. We're back in a minute with an old friend of mine who I recently discovered is an incredible woodworking artist, and I had no idea. Kip Glover is going to join us. We're going to talk a little bit about his journey as an artist in woodworking when we get back from the break. Thanks, Luke. Don't turn it down. We're back with Kip in a minute.
All right, you're clear.
Thanks, Luke.
Thanks, Elizabeth. Thanks, Richard. You guys take care.
You
Cheers.
too.
This is the place that talks about Santa Barbara.
I'm Ben Hayes in the News Center.
Steve Cates, Dr. Sky.
I'm Donnie Risden. I'm Ed Giron.
I'm Maria Long.
I'm Mark Schneidman.
I'm Diane Duva.
My name's Andy Caldwell.
I'm Erica, the Queen of Keene.
I'm Scott Dweck. I'm Mike Williams.
I'm Ted Adams.
I'm Guy Rivera.
I'm Michael Self.
I'm Steve Forcell.
I'm Jim Williams.
I'm Dale Francisco.
I'm Tom Woodrow. I'm Eloy Ortega.
I'm Earl Armstrong.
I'm Neil Kreisel.
I am Sam Edelman.
I'm Arthur von Wiesenberger.
I'm Martha Bull.
I am your host, Jeremiah.
I'm Elizabeth Stewart.
Hi, I'm Chris Cullen.
I'm Lisa Cullen.
And I'm Leanna Finley.
Drew Wakefield. I'm Mark Giles. John Martinet. I'm Richard Dugan. It's TV's Tim Stack.
KZSB, the Santa Barbara News Press radio station.
Hello, Kip. So come off of mute, Kip. There you go.
There we go. Good morning.
And are you on a video or not? No.
The world's most important medicine,
No.
insulin, became available for general use
I
this month in
start my video.
saving the lives of
Yeah,
millions
you can. You can start your video because we actually archive it. There we go. Hey.
of death
Morning.
sentence,
Boy,
diabetes,
that was a great show.
sufferers the prospect of living full
And then Richard,
productive
can you hear
lives.
Kip?
Pharmaceutical
Yes, I can hear him. He needs to speak up though, or turn his volume on his microphone up a little bit. How's this? Is that better? If you can bring it up a little more, going into the Zoom audio settings and turn your microphone up a little more. Oh boy. Mute.
Richard just showed me how to do that. You go to the little mute thing to the arrow up.
Yeah.
Next to the mute thing, and then it says settings at the bottom of the screen you get, and then you turn the little slider all the way over.
Audio settings. Okay. I'll turn the output volume up. The
Yeah.
microphone volume. Okay. All right, stand by. We're coming back in 3, 2, 1.
Welcome back. It's Elizabeth Stewart, and I did not know this, but my friend Kip Glover, who I know from my world because he's senior relocation expert, and Kip has hired me for his clients, on and off for years, and I knew that was his business, and I've known Kip for a number of years, and then I am always pleased to see that he has new listings because he's a realtor as well. He became a realtor and actually has really cool listings usually, and those intrigued me. But I didn't know that since he was in grade school, has been intrigued by art and design, and he especially was interested in woodworking from very young age on. And Kip is just amazing. I did not know that, and I didn't know how beautiful your creations are. I actually looked at Glover Design Studio online, and I saw these beautiful, dear listeners, beautiful mirrors. I was thinking, where could I use a couple of those? Beautiful mirrors that are interesting, and the frames are so fascinating, and they're so pretty. The wood is so interesting, and the workmanship is so precise. Now, Kip, I knew you lived with an artist, but I didn't know you were an artist. That's the weird thing. Whenever we get together, we talk biz, and then I bought some of your partners. I bought some of her. She's a wonderful watercolorist, and she does beautiful greeting cards, and I buy those regularly. I love her work. I knew that she was an artist. I didn't know you were an artist, and I just want to tell listeners a bit about my discovery of your background as an artist. He at 18 was working at a design firm in Stockholm, Sweden, and he was building wooden architectural models, and it was an apprenticeship program as part of a high school exchange program in Stockholm. And now, what year was that, Kip? Do you remember what year?
Oh, I remember just a few years ago. That was in the 70s, the late 70s.
Okay, so dear listener, what I just want to offer you this little tidbit that back in the 30s and 40s in Sweden, there arose a school of woodworking that impacts us today even still. And it's a design that we call Scandinavian modern. And what the Swedish artisans and woodworkers were doing in the 30s and 40s, and then in the 50s it took off, was in tiny little craft studios all over Sweden. They were developing ways of working with wood that was streamlining the design of the furniture. And if you guys are thinking, well, I love a clean, clear Scandinavian look in my house, it goes back to that time in Sweden. That's where that comes from. And so from the 30s to the 40s, and then it blossoms in the 50s, and we get Scandinavian design taking over the world of design. But from little workman studios in wood, all dotting all over Scandinavia, specifically Sweden and Denmark, and Finland a little bit too. So if you go back to the history of design in wood, you're going to end up in Scandinavia. And that's why I was interested. In 1970s, Kip was working in the apprenticeship program as an 18-year-old in Sweden. And he was making these models. At the same time, he was looking at the Swedish aesthetic. Now, what caught my eye on this, Kip, is my brother, David, for almost 40 years, or maybe it's 40 years now, he married a Danish girl, and he's lived in Copenhagen, and he has his summer house with the view of Sweden, so he can see Sweden from his summer house. And he's often, obviously, it's a hop, skip, and a jump. So his two houses there are in that modern style, in the Scandinavian modern style. And the aesthetic is, whenever I go visit over there, I'm like, why don't we live like this? It's such a beautiful, clean aesthetic. And the thing that I remember most clearly is that most families that can afford it will hire a woodworker like you to design a family dining table.
Yes.
And the family dining table in my brother's houses are 12 feet long plus, because he can sit anybody, extended family. And it's an important part of the house. A huge important part of the house is to sit and eat together at a beautifully crafted piece of furniture. And so when I read this in your bio, I thought, my friend Kip trained in such a way that that's his aesthetic too. I had no idea. Richard's giving us a sign. We have to go to a quick break. I want to talk a little bit about the Krenov School of Fine Furniture that you were accepted to and studied recently in Mendocino County. I've heard of that school. I want to know what you learned there. I want to know a little more about it. And I want to know what they teach as far as the aesthetic of woodworking when we get back from the break. I'm speaking with Kip Glover, man of many hats, senior relocation service, a realtor, and now I'm finding out a really talented artist in wood since the age of 18. I had no idea. Don't turn that dial. Back in a minute with Kip.
All right, you're clear.
Okay.
See, it's so interesting to me, Kip, as we think, we're here in the States, we're cutting edge, we're so modern and blah, blah, blah. When I'm over in Sweden and Denmark, it's like we are so backward. I didn't want to say that. But we're so backward. Our design aesthetic is so backward. The way we eat, the way we entertain, what we consider valuable, the social programs, the technical literacy of the countries. I'm not surprised my brother stayed over there for 40 years.
It's a wonderful life, the quality of life. I've been so fond. It's always been my dream to have a home there and one here.
Yeah.
And I don't get back.
Yeah. My brother, he's sort of, he comes and visits, but he doesn't have a home here. He prefers Scandinavia. He was raised here, prefers Scandinavia. But one of the things, just sort of, this isn't really important, but one of the things he considers really valuable in the culture is the way they have continuous education. So he gets, even though he's very high up in his corporation, he gets like almost a month every year
Yes.
where he goes with his family and he studies one thing, his wife studies another thing, and his children study something else, and it's completely paid for. And it's a month.
Yes. Yes.
It's expected.
All
You're
right,
going to be gone for a
Elizabeth,
month,
when we come
but you're
back,
going
we
to learn
still
something.
have, what is this here? One more break to go, okay? Elizabeth?
Yeah.
All right, one more break to go after this.
Okay.
Here we go. 3, 2, 1, you're live.
Welcome back. It's Elizabeth Stewart speaking with Kip Glover. I've known Kip for years. I didn't know he was a woodworker. And then I went on, he actually sent me an email saying, I know you love art. What do you think about these? And they were, some images of some beautiful mirror frames that he was working on. I was blown away. So tell us your training at the Krenoff School of Fine Furniture. Tell us what that is, Kip.
Well, the Krenoff School has been up in Fort Bragg, California for approximately 40 years. And I was able to get accepted back in 2010 for the 9-month program. And I really didn't know about it much before that date, but somebody brought it to my attention, and once I checked it out and spoke to a number of people, I was really blown away and went to visit the school. And it's a 6 days a week program from about 8 to 5. And so it's a very dedicated program. There's only about 16-ish first year students and 5 second-year students. So you get to work with people very closely, and the instructors are, some of the best around the country. So it was really about, discovering, working with new tools and working with different woods. A chance to, the program enabled you to do 2 pieces during that 9-month period, and there was 2 shows as well at the end of the period for the
And
community.
what did you make? What did you make?
I made one of the images I sent you was, first thing was that I called Black Beauty. It was a hall table with a drawer, and that was made out of a dark wood called wenge and a yellow wood called yellow hearts. And that was a lot of fun. Obviously, you make mock-ups, and there's actually the first month of the program, you're really learning about a variety of things, and then you go into your first project. And the second project is a teak dining table that I did.
And do you still own those, or did you sell those?
Excuse me, teak coffee table. I still have those. Yep.
I'd love to see those one day. And so once you finished that program, were you tempted to go off and just say, I'm not doing anything else but woodwork?
Very much so. And it was just a matter of practicality at that time. And it's that's a big jump. And it's so it I've worked with wood since then, but it's been limited. So I have a shop that I use, and though with limited availability. So
Richard, I think we should go to quick break before it gets too late, but we'll go to quick break. But what I'm interested in knowing is, Kip over the years has enlisted me to help with look at some furniture of seniors that he's helping move. And he has a senior relocation service. And so he's, brought me into homes, and he's brought me photos of furniture that has been in the family, for example, for 50, 60 years. And they're usually beautiful, beautiful pieces of wood. And the market doesn't like those anymore. And so I'd be interested to know, just, buddy to buddy on that, Kip, what you feel about that. Sometimes my heart bleeds. It's like, and it's such a beautiful piece, but it just is not loved. The market doesn't want those handmade wood pieces. And it's even interesting too, Richard, my young son, he's 34, 35, his house, he doesn't like that at all. He wants clean, kind of IKEA kind of clean lines like that. So, the market is slow for beautiful pieces of the ages past. And I wonder if Kip would opine on that as a woodworker when we get back from the break. Don't turn that down. Back with Kip Glover in a minute.
Okay.
No, it's funny, Kip. I don't know if you can see
Yes.
way in the back of the kitchen here. This is a I don't know if you could see that, but it's a 1930s English walnut and burl walnut. It's a bar, and
Yes.
the top opens, and then the cabinets open, and it's all fitted.
Yes.
It's even so fitted that there's a rack for two olive picks. Little. I mean, it's the whole thing, and a rack for mixing shot glasses, and it's an amazing work of art. And you see it's quite over the top. And I found it in a thrift store for nothing.
There's a lot of thought that went into those pieces.
Yeah,
Yeah. And
and tremendous amount of work,
yes.
and I just think about like what it represents, because I think when I look at that piece, and the bottom, you can open the bottom cabinet, and there's a lazy Susan that has
All right,
little
here we
spots
go. In 3, 2, 1, you're live.
Welcome back. It's Elizabeth Stewart speaking with Kip Glover, who is head of senior relocation services here in Santa Barbara, also a realtor. And also now I'm finding out has since the age of 18, and Kip and I are neither of us spring chickens, so it's been a long time that Kip's been interested in woodworking and a practicing wood artist for years. And I asked him what his opinion was. So now he's both a realtor, and he's inside people's houses, and he's a senior relocation expert, and he's faced with some interior problems right now, which is that the market is not thrilled with the furniture of the past, and it's very difficult to even sell those pieces. And I was telling Kip over the break, I've got this piece you can see behind me. Of course, you can't because you're on radio, but Kip can see me. The piece that's behind me is a massive cocktail bar from the 1930s, and that I found for peanuts in a thrift store because nobody wanted it. Kip, what do you think about this market today?
Well, your piece, that's a wonderful, 1930s piece. And as I was mentioning, there's so much, thought that goes into those early pieces, and it's a very refined piece. And it is sad, that tastes have changed from, as they should, from generation to generation. But, the kids, nowadays are not so favorable about their parents' pieces, when it comes time to, you know, to moving them on. But so it's, just the tastes have changed. And you're right, we talked about IKEA. There's a lot of interest in, that furniture. And So it's
How do you just as a point of interest, how do you explain that though to let's say you're working with an older client? I mean, I'm always challenged how to explain that because they've had something like this in their family. Let's say it's a piece of 19th century furniture and they love it and they've always been told it's valuable, and it is, but it's not valuable today. And how do you explain that?
It's a difficult conversation. I pride myself in, over the time I spend with them, getting comfortable to know them and vice versa. And I tell them, I'll do my best to find a home for these special pieces so that they can be moved forward to, the next household. But they it makes them sad when they think there might be that possibility that they might be thrown away. And I reassure them I'm going to, do my best to find a place for the piece for somebody else to enjoy them as much as they have over all those years.
And as a woodworker, I would think now that gives a whole other dimension, because as a woodworker, when I talk to you about this particular problem in the market today, your reaction was there's so much thought behind those pieces and so much, hands-on creativity behind those pieces. I wouldn't have thought that to be my first thought that pops into my head, that this represents a good year's worth of work for somebody. Yeah, but that.
Oh yes, very time consuming, and these are not just straight rectilinear pieces. They're all kinds of shapes and very time consuming work.
Now, if people want to know more about your woodworking, how do they find out?
They can jump on to kipglover.com or Glover Design Studio.com.
And they can see now what sort of pieces do you have online right now?
I have a variety of pieces, quite a few mirrors. I have a chair that I refer to as a ladder back chair that was, I have a maple antique cart, a hall table, coffee tables. I have a couple of paintings. With COVID and not having access to the shop, I started painting. It was hard to see Cheryl painting in the house every day, and so I decided to do some painting. So a variety of pieces, and they're really, one of a kind pieces. I'm not much of a production worker where I like to make things twice.
And so the idea that was intriguing to me was the combination of material that I was seeing in your on-site studio, online studio. There's hardware, there's glass, acrylic, and found objects, and some of the mirrors have really interesting patterns. Kip, thank you for coming on. I appreciate it very much. Glover Design Studios, if you want to know more, and also, of course, Senior Location Services and Realtor Services. Kip Glover, thanks for coming on.
Thank you so much. Have a great weekend.
All right, you are clear.
Excellent, Kip. How cool is that? No, I knew Cheryl was the artist in the family, but I find out that's not true. They're both of you.
I was so nervous. I don't think I've ever been on the radio, but thank you for
you did great. And no, you did great. And totally, we got the sense of, your passion about this and how interested, and that you are such an interesting person, that you wear all these different hats. It came through really well.
Thank you.
And I'll send you the link to this. And by the way, my agreement with the radio station is that once I have an artist on the program, that artist owns the show that he or she is on. So that means that you can use this on your website. You can use clips of it. You don't have to use the entirety. You can just use it how you want, and but use it if you want to. And anyway, thanks, Kim.
Thank you
A lot
so
of fun.
much. And
Yeah,
that was cool. Anyway, I get to
I
see
look forward to
you.
seeing you soon.
Okay, bye-bye.